to make a claim they do exist, then they have to provide that evidence. And man, as everyone here would agree, that people have created several thousand gods over the course of human history. And I think we all have to ask ourselves, just like I did, what makes ours so special? My biggest pet peeve on this topic is, don't call atheism a religion. It's not. Like I said, it's a lack of accepting claims. There's no dogma, there's no tenets, there's scripture, no clergy, no places of worship. It lacks any if you wanted to redefine religion to include atheism, you'd have to include things like being a fan of football or of a TV show or something like that. To call atheism a religion is to say that bald is a hair color, not collecting stamps is a hobby, or that off is a TV channel. These are a few famous atheists, or non-believers, as some of them might describe themselves, and I just included it here for completeness, just as an idea. You may recognize some faces up there. Just a couple stats, just so people know what population non-believers make up. In 2008, the adult population was 15% in a category that they call no religion. So this would include atheist, agnostic, or people that just say, I don't have a religion, which is a lot bigger than I think a lot of people acknowledge. This number outnumbers Jews, homosexuals, black, African Americans. It's a lot bigger than people would understand at first, and when you break that down to the younger demographic, it increases dramatically. So fully 1 in 5 people in your guys' age, most of your age range, would be someone who doesn't have a religion. In this segment, or they call it the nuns, as in N-O-N-E-S, the no religion group, is actually the fastest growing demographic in this country right now. All the other religious groups tend to be stagnating somewhat. Catholics are losing numbers pretty dramatically, and most of the Christian sects are either holding steady or losing. The only benefit some of the Christian faiths are getting is from immigration. They're getting a little bit of a boost there, but for the most part, the non-believers are the fastest growing. So just think that 1 in 5 people in this room could be a non-believer, and most people aren't too upfront with it, just because of, like I showed you the stats in the second slide, that a lot of non-believers tend to be looked down upon in our society for some reason, which I haven't really come to understand yet. And then when you break this down then further into the most elite scientists in our country, the National Academy of Science, it's completely flip-flopped. Only 7% of them actually believe in a God. Atheism. So what a lot of people want to, I'd like to stand up here and tell you what all atheists believe, but like I said, there's no dogma. So beyond the single question, and really the only thing all atheists can be said to have in common is they don't believe in a God. So if you ask the question, do you accept the claim that a God exists? If you say yes, you're a theist. If you say no, you're an atheist. It's really that simple. Anything beyond that's up for grabs. So I can kind of tell you what I do believe, and I'll try to stick with things from here on out that I think most atheists would tend to agree with me on, but like I said, we fall down anywhere. Most atheists are going to be skeptical of unsubstantiated or especially supernatural claims. So psychics, UFOs, demons. I wrote, one of my articles was on debunking psychics in the paper a few months back. So we tend to have skepticism on a lot of those things that aren't evidence-based. We're pro-science, things like evolution, proper understanding of the age of the universe, we're generally advocates of. And then a lot of atheists tend to be liberal-leaning, though in our free thought group there are a lot of conservatives, but generally they're conservative for fiscal reasons. When it comes down to social conservative liberal values, you'll find that almost all atheists tend to be pretty liberal in those instances. We're very pro-gay rights, animal rights, separation of church and state, reproductive choice, things like that. So some questions that a theist might ask an atheist would be, well, if we don't believe in a God that created us, where do we believe we came from? Well, obviously the first most verifiable thing that I would answer is I came from my parents. This can be confirmed genetically if it were ever in doubt. Well, that's usually not enough to satisfy them. They want to know, well, what do you think happened before people? Where did people come from? Well, the theory of evolution put forth by Charles Darwin and since expanded on by modern science is actually proved that We do share a common ancestor with all other life, and most recently the great apes. This can also be confirmed genetically. Our most recent, our living closest relative would be the chimpanzees, which we shared a relative with about 5 to 7 million years ago, is where we diverged path in our evolutionary tree. Prior to that, the science is, well, where did all living things come from? That branch of science is called abiogenesis, and that basically means life from non-life. How did the first self-replicating molecule come into existence? And while this hasn't been duplicated in a lab per se, a lot of the individual pieces actually have been. They've observed amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins, spontaneously forming themselves in tubes. There have been trials where they've found RNA, which is a precursor to DNA, and does a lot of the same things in a lot of cases, and they found that to be self-forming under certain conditions as well. So a lot of the pieces are there, but we can't say that in a lab we've created life from non-life just yet. Well, where did all matter come from? Well, Carl Sagan again had a pretty profound quote, I think, in which he said we're all made of star stuff, and what he means by that is stars were the first things to exist in our universe, and they're basically a collection of hydrogen and helium, and they're huge fusion reactors, which means they smash atoms together, create heavier atoms, and eventually once they use up all their fuel, if the star's big enough, they'll go supernova and explode, which scatters all of their contents across the universe. These contents over millions and millions of years coalesce into planets, and eventually that's where we came from. So it's a pretty profound thought in my mind to consider that we are actually all members of the universe, not outside observers, that our ancestors are the stars themselves, and that a star had to die to make us, essentially. So it's kind of profound when you think about it. And then all that stuff, obviously, the current scientific understanding is that it originated with the Big Bang, which it was, I'm going to say the numbers, 13.5 billion years ago. So what theism basically does is all it can do is replace a mystery with another mystery. They say, what made the universe? Well, God did it. But then the question becomes, well, what if you require God to explain the universe? Well, then God must also require an explanation. So what made God? It doesn't really do to say God just always existed, because then I can just say, well, then the universe always existed. Prior to the Big Bang, it just had a different form. So it just replaces a mystery with a mystery. If atheists are asked what happens when we die, I guess the most honest answer is we don't know, and that's okay. Sometimes we don't know the answer. My personal opinion is along the lines of Steven Pinker, who is an evolutionary psychologist. He said the mind is what the brain does, and what he means by that is our consciousness, everything we think and feel, is all derived from the organ between our ears, the human brain. It's a computer, and when those neurons and those cells start to die, what we are die as well. And I think this is pretty clear when you look at it. If you look at people who have Alzheimer's, you look at people who have strokes where pieces of their brains are damaged. They lobotomize people for therapeutic benefits at an earlier time. And anytime you cause damage to the brain, or like in Alzheimer's, that person changes. Or you have someone who has a stroke, you can have total shifts in personality. They may like one thing before a stroke, like a different thing afterwards. They may not be able to get along with their spouse afterwards. Their personality changes. So if what we are is some kind of soul that's inhabiting a body, how can our personality, our consciousness, our likes and dislikes be altered by altering this brain, this organ? So, and also when considering what happens to other animals, I don't meet too many theists who think that all the animals that have ever lived are going to be in heaven or have some kind of heaven of their own. If that were the case, it'd probably be overrun with beetles and all kinds of things like that. But so when we understand that we all evolved from earlier life forms, then it stands to reason that we would all suffer the same fate. A couple good quotes. Mark Twain was a non-believer. He said that, "I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and I had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it," which I think is kind of nice.